Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Lane reclined on the king-sized bed, her eyes following Mac's movements with a mixture of amusement and concern. You know, she said, breaking the silence, we could always go down to the boutique and browse. No pressure to buy anything. Mac paused mid-step, his gaze darting to meet Lane's. I don't know, he mumbled, running a hand through his short brown hair. What if someone recognizes us? Lane sat up, swinging her legs off the bed. Mac, honey, that's the beauty of staying at a place like this. Everyone's too wrapped up in their own world to care about what we're doing. The corner of Mac's mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile threatening to emerge. You always know what to say, don't you? It's a gift, Lane replied with a wink. She stood up, smoothing out her sundress. Come on, let's at least window shop. We can pretend we're looking for something for me if anyone asks. Mac hesitated for a moment longer before nodding. All right, but promise me we'll be discreet. Cross my heart, Lane said, making the gesture dramatically. She linked her arm through Mac's and led him towards the door. Now let's go see what fabulous finds await us. As they stepped into the corridor, the opulence of the hotel surrounded them. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting a warm glow on the intricately patterned wallpaper. Their footsteps echoed softly on the marble floor as they made their way to the elevator. Inside the lift, Mac's reflections stared back at him from the mirrored walls. He studied his features, wondering not for the first time how he might look with longer hair, maybe a touch of makeup. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. Lane squeezed his hand reassuringly as the elevator descended. Remember, she whispered, you don't owe anyone an explanation. We're just two people out for a bit of shopping. The doors slid open, revealing the hotel's lavish lobby. A handful of guests milled about, their designer clothes and confident postures screaming old money. Mac tensed, but Lane's steady presence beside him kept him moving forward. They crossed the lobby, heading towards a corridor lined with high-end boutiques. The first shop window displayed an array of glittering jewelry, but it was the second that caught Mac's eye. Mannequins posed in elegant dresses and skirts, their fabric shimmering under the soft lighting. Lane noticed Mac's gaze lingering on a particular emerald green dress. That would look stunning on you, she murmured, just loud enough for him to hear. Mac's cheeks flushed, but he didn't deny it. Do you think... He started, then shook his head. Never mind. No, go on, Lane encouraged, turning to face him fully. Mac took a deep breath. Do you think we could go in, just to look? Lane's face lit up with a brilliant smile. Absolutely. Come on, let's see what they have. As they entered the boutique, a bell chimed softly overhead. The interior was plush and intimate, with racks of clothing arranged artfully throughout the space. A saleswoman approached them, her smile professional and welcoming. Good afternoon, she greeted. Is there anything I can help you find today? Lane smoothly took the lead. We're just browsing for now, thank you. My friend here has excellent taste, and I always value her opinion when shopping. Mac felt a flutter in his chest at Lane's casual use of her. The saleswoman nodded politely and retreated, leaving them to explore on their own. They moved through the boutique, fingers trailing over soft fabrics and sparkling embellishments. Mac found himself drawn to a rack of blouses in various jewel tones. He paused at a sapphire blue one, admiring the delicate lace detailing along the neckline. Lane appeared at his side, holding up the emerald dress they'd seen in the window. Want to try it on? She asked, her voice low and encouraging. Mac's eyes widened. I don't know if I'm ready for that, he whispered back. No pressure, Lane assured him. But if you want to, I can run interference with the saleswoman. Say it's for me, and you can try it on to see how it falls on someone closer to my size. The idea was tempting, more tempting than Mac wanted to admit. He glanced around the store, noting that they were the only customers present. Maybe just for a minute. Lane beamed at him. That's the spirit. Wait here. I'll go chat with our helpful friend over there." As Lane engaged the saleswoman in conversation, gesturing animatedly about some imaginary event she needed a dress for, Mac slipped into one of the changing rooms with the emerald dress. His hands shook slightly as he undressed, careful not to make too much noise. The fabric of the dress was cool and smooth against his skin as he slipped it on. It took some maneuvering to get the zipper up, but when he finally turned to look in the mirror, his breath caught in his throat. The dress hugged his body in all the right places, the color bringing out flecks of green in his hazel eyes. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine how he'd look with long hair, maybe some earrings. A soft knock on the door startled him out of his reverie.
"Everything okay in there?"
Lane's voice came through. "Yes," Mac replied, his voice barely above a whisper. It's beautiful. Can I see?" Mac hesitated for a moment before cracking the door open. Lane slipped inside, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of him. "Oh, Mac," she breathed. "You look absolutely gorgeous." Tears pricked at the corners of Mac's eyes.
"Really?"
Lane nodded emphatically.
"Really? How do you feel?"
Mac turned back to the mirror, smoothing his hands down the sides of the dress. "I feel right," he admitted. "Like this is who I'm supposed to be." Lane wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "Then that's all that matters. We don't have to buy it today if you're not ready, but know that I support you, no matter what." They stood like that for a moment, both of them gazing at Mac's reflection. Finally, Mac took a deep breath. I think I want to buy it." Lane squeezed him tightly. "Then let's do it. One step at a time, okay?" Mac nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling up inside him. As he changed back into his own clothes, he couldn't help but run his fingers over the dress one last time, marveling at how such a simple piece of fabric could make him feel so alive. When they emerged from the changing room, Lane smoothly handled the purchase, keeping up the pretense that the dress was for her. The saleswoman complimented her choice, none the wiser about its true intended wearer. As they left the boutique, shopping bag in hand, Mac felt as though he was floating. The weight of the secret he'd carried for so long seemed lighter somehow, shared now with Lane and validated by this small act of authenticity. "So," Lane said as they made their way back to the elevator, "what's next on our agenda? We could hit the pool or maybe check out that restaurant on the top floor?" Mac considered for a moment. "Actually," he said slowly, "I was thinking maybe we could look at some accessories, to go with the dress." Lane's face lit up with delight. "Now you're talking. I saw a shoe store a couple doors down that looked promising." As they rode the elevator back down to the boutique level, Mac felt a surge of gratitude for Lane's unwavering support. He squeezed her hand, wordlessly conveying his thanks. The shoe store was a treasure trove of glittering heels and elegant flats. Mac found himself drawn to a pair of strappy sandals with a modest heel, imagining how they'd look with the emerald dress. "Those would be perfect," Lane commented, noticing his interest. "Want to try them on?" Mac nodded, surprised by his own eagerness. The salesperson brought over his size, and Mac slipped them on, marveling at how different they felt from his usual footwear. "Take a few steps," Lane encouraged. "Get a feel for them." Mac stood carefully, wobbling slightly as he adjusted to the new center of balance. He took a tentative step, then another, gaining confidence with each movement. "You're a natural," Lane praised. "How do they feel?" "Different," Mac admitted. "But good different. Like I'm seeing a new side of myself." They left the store with the sandals tucked safely in a bag alongside the dress. Mac felt a mix of excitement and nervousness about his purchases, but Lane's steady presence beside him helped calm his jitters. As they made their way back to their room, Lane linked her arm through Mac's. "I'm proud of you, she said softly. "It takes a lot of courage to be true to yourself." Mac felt a lump form in his throat. "I couldn't have done it without you." he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Once back in their suite, Mac carefully hung up the dress and placed the shoes beside it. He stood back, admiring the items that represented a part of himself he'd kept hidden for so long. Lane came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "So," she murmured, "any plans for your new outfit?" Mac leaned back into her embrace, considering. I'm not sure I'm ready to wear it out in public yet," he admitted. "But maybe I could try it on again later, just for us." "I'd love that," Lane replied. "Whenever you're ready, I'm here for you." The rest of the day passed in a blur of poolside relaxation and room service dining. As evening approached, Mac found himself drawn back to the dress hanging in the closet. His fingers trailed over the soft fabric, his heart racing with anticipation. "Lane!" he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. She appeared in the doorway, a soft smile on her face. "Yeah?" Mac took a deep breath. I think I'm ready to try it on again, if that's okay." Lane's smile widened. "Of course it's okay. Do you want help?" Mac nodded, grateful for her offer. Together, they carefully removed the dress from its hanger. Lane helped Mac slip into it, her touch gentle and reassuring as she zipped it up. "The shoes, too?" she asked, and Mac nodded again. Once the outfit was complete, Lane stepped back, her eyes shining with admiration. "You look beautiful," she said softly. "Truly, Mac, you're radiant." Mac turned to face the full-length mirror, his breath catching in his throat. The person staring back at him was both familiar and strange, a version of himself he'd only ever imagined. He smoothed his hands down the sides of the dress, marveling at how natural it felt. "I feel," he started, struggling to find the words. "I feel like me, more me than I've ever felt before." Lane came up behind him, resting her chin on his shoulder as they both gazed at his reflection. "That's because it is you," she said. "All of you, not just the parts you thought you had to show the world." Tears welled up in Mac's eyes, but for once they were tears of joy and relief. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything." They stood like that for a long moment, both lost in thought. Finally, Lane spoke up. "You know, we could order room service if you want to stay dressed up for a while longer. Have a little private dinner party?" Mac's face lit up at the suggestion. "I'd love that," he said, surprising himself with his enthusiasm. As Lane called down to place their order, Mac carefully sat on the edge of the bed, marveling at how different it felt to move in a dress and heels. He found himself practicing small gestures, crossing his legs, smoothing the fabric over his knees, tucking an imaginary strand of hair behind his ear. When Lane finished with the call, she sat down beside him. "So," she said, a playful glint in her eye, "shall we think about accessories? I spotted some lovely costume jewelry in one of the boutiques earlier." Mac chuckled, feeling more at ease than he had in years. "One step at a time," he replied. "But maybe tomorrow?" "It's a date," Lane agreed. The rest of the evening passed in a comfortable bubble of intimacy. They dined on gourmet cuisine, laughing and talking as if it were any other night, except for the thrilling undercurrent of Mac's transformation. He found himself gesturing more freely, his voice taking on a softer quality that felt right in a way he couldn't quite explain. As the night wore on and their meal came to an end, Mac felt a pang of reluctance at the thought of changing back into his regular clothes. Lane, perceptive as always, picked up on his hesitation. "You know," she said casually, "there's no rule that says you have to change. You could sleep in a nightgown if you wanted. I think I saw some silky ones in that lingerie shop downstairs." Mac's eyes widened at the suggestion. "Do you think... would that be okay?" Lane smiled warmly. "Mac, honey, it's more than okay. It's whatever makes you comfortable and happy. That's all I want for you." Overwhelmed with emotion, Mac pulled Lane into a tight embrace. "What did I do to deserve you?" he murmured against her hair. "You were yourself," Lane replied simply. That's more than enough. The next morning, Mac woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the soft rustle of silk against his skin. For a moment, he was disoriented, but then the events of the previous day came flooding back. He sat up slowly, marveling at the feel of the nightgown Lane had bought for him. Lane stirred beside him, her eyes fluttering open. "Good morning, beautiful," she murmured, her voice still thick with sleep. Mac felt a blush creep up his cheeks, but he couldn't suppress the smile that spread across his face. "Good morning," he replied softly. As they got ready for the day, Mac found himself torn between the desire to put on the emerald dress again and the fear of venturing out in public. Lane, sensing his internal struggle, gently suggested a compromise. "Why don't we order breakfast to the room?" she proposed. "You can wear the dress here, where it's just us. And then, if you feel comfortable, we could maybe take a walk around the hotel grounds later?" Mac nodded gratefully, relieved at not having to make a decision just yet. He slipped into the dress, marveling once again at how right it felt against his skin. As they enjoyed their breakfast on the balcony, overlooking the hotel's lush gardens, Mac found himself relaxing into his new persona. He practiced holding his cup delicately, crossing his legs at the ankle, all the little mannerisms he'd observed in women over the years, but never allowed himself to emulate. Lane watched him with a mix of pride and adoration. "You know," she said between bites of croissant, "we should think about a name for when you're dressed like this, something that feels right for your feminine side." Mac paused, considering. He'd never allowed himself to think that far ahead, always assuming his desires would remain locked away, a secret fantasy. I'm not sure," he admitted. "Do you have any ideas?" Lane tilted her head, studying him thoughtfully. "How about McKenzie? It's close enough to Mac that it might feel natural, but distinctly feminine." "McKenzie," Mac repeated softly, testing the name on his tongue. A slow smile spread across his face. "I like it. It feels right. McKenzie it is, then," Lane declared with a grin. "Now, McKenzie, what shall we do with our day?" The simple act of using the feminine name sent a thrill through Mac, or rather McKenzie. It was as if a door had been opened, allowing a part of herself that had been locked away for so long to finally step into the light. "I think," McKenzie said slowly, surprising herself with her own boldness, "I'd like to try going for that walk. Maybe even visit one of the boutiques again?" Lane's face lit up with excitement. "Really? Oh, McKenzie, that's wonderful! We'll take it slow, okay? And if at any point you feel uncomfortable, we'll come right back to the room. No questions asked." McKenzie nodded, feeling a mix of nervousness and exhilaration. She stood up, smoothing down the front of her dress. Do I look okay?" she asked hesitantly. Lane stood as well, coming around the table to take Mackenzie's hands in hers. "You look beautiful," she said firmly. "But more importantly, you look happy. That's what really matters." With a deep breath to steady her nerves, Mackenzie allowed Lane to lead her towards the door. As they stepped out into the hallway, she felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely empowered. Each step in her new heels was a small act of defiance against years of repression. They made their way to the elevator, Mackenzie's heart pounding as they encountered other hotel guests. To her surprise and relief, most people barely gave them a second glance. Those who did simply offered polite nods or smiles, seeing nothing more than two women out for a morning stroll. As they reached the lobby, Mackenzie's grip on Lane's hand tightened. The space was busier than it had been the day before, with guests checking in and out, bellhops ferrying luggage, and small groups gathered in plush seating areas. "You're doing great," Lane murmured encouragingly. "Remember, you don't owe anyone an explanation. We're just two friends enjoying our stay." Mackenzie nodded, trying to project an air of confidence she didn't entirely feel. They made their way across the lobby, heading towards the doors that led to the hotel's manicured gardens. The fresh air hit Mackenzie like a wave, carrying with it the scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. She took a deep breath, feeling some of her tension dissipate. The gardens were beautiful, with winding paths leading through beds of colorful flowers and around a central fountain. As they walked, McKenzie found herself relaxing bit by bit. The sun was warm on her skin, the breeze gently rustling the skirt of her dress. She even caught herself smiling at a couple who passed them on the path, returning their friendly nod without a second thought. "How are you feeling?" Lane asked as they paused to admire a particularly stunning rose bush. McKenzie considered for a moment before answering. "Surprisingly good," she admitted. "It's strange, but also wonderful, like I'm finally allowing myself to be me." Lane squeezed her hand. "I'm so proud of you, McKenzie. You're incredibly brave, you know that?" The compliment warmed McKenzie from the inside out. She'd never thought of herself as brave before, but taking these steps, allowing herself to be seen as she truly felt, maybe that did require a certain kind of courage. As they completed their circuit of the gardens, McKenzie found herself reluctant to go back inside. "Do you think," she began hesitantly, "do you think we could visit one of the boutiques? Maybe look at some jewelry like you suggested?" Lane's face lit up with excitement. "Absolutely. I saw a lovely little shop yesterday that I think you'd adore. Shall we?" With a nod of agreement, McKenzie allowed Lane to guide her back into the hotel and towards the row of high-end shops. The boutique Lane had mentioned was small but elegant, its windows displaying an array of glittering necklaces, earrings, and bracelets. As they entered, a soft bell chimed overhead. The saleswoman behind the counter looked up, offering them a warm smile. "Good morning, ladies. Is there anything I can help you find today?" McKenzie felt a thrill at being addressed as part of a pair of women. She glanced at Lane, who gave her an encouraging nod. "We're just browsing for now," McKenzie said, surprised by how natural her slightly higher-pitched voice sounded. "But thank you." The saleswoman nodded. "Of course. Please let me know if you need any assistance." Thanks for watching. Check out Patreon if you want to have early access to the other parts. If not, it will be online in a couple of days.